Welcome to Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob and Adam here today. Get your super chats in, and we will answer any questions you've got. If you've got any points you want to make about fifth defeat in 6 for the Seahawks. Wow. Do you know what my reaction to this game is, Adam? It's actually I'm actually quite sad about it. I'm actually quite sad because that today makes me question everything about this franchise. It goes way beyond it being ugly at times, there being massive extremes between what was very good and what was very, very, very bad. It actually makes me think you kind of know when you've won the coaching lottery. And the Seahawks are a shambles. Like, they really are. They rely on moments, and the fundamentals are a disgrace on both sides of the ball. So I'm sat here now wondering, I'm not calling for anybody to be fired or anything like that, but I am watching that today, and we're deep into the season now. We're beyond halfway. I'm watching that, and I'm thinking, if you can't even get the basics right this deep into a season, if you're losing 4 straight home games, if you're 1-5 in 6 games, I'm starting to wonder whether they've just not got this right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you have got this wrong, then that calls into question everything about the person who made the decision to appoint the staff and has built this roster and has built this offensive line. And so you then start asking questions about that. And then you take another step back and you just look at the franchise and the state of it on the whole, and it's just meh. It just is, isn't it? Like, from ownership downwards at the minute, there is nothing to get you excited. I wasn't excited before this game, and I'm not excited after it. And I just sit here now and I think the only way to fix this is a long process. A long process, which it requires honesty and the desire to actually go through what is required to make those changes. And I don't know whether they've got the honesty or the appetite to do that, Adam. I really don't. So I'm kind of sat here as a Seahawks fan right now, feeling, where's this team going? Where is it going? Because that was a mess. And if anybody thinks the fact that they came back at the end and took it to overtime and all that was a mess today. A mess. And it isn't one person's fault. There's about, God, we could spend the whole night talking about whose fault it is, Adam. But that's my reaction. I wanted to get it off my chest. What do you think?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I've got 2 WhatsApp groups that I speak to, or groups about the Seahawks, and one of them is you, and one of them is the guys that I podcast with and go with. And I text both of you saying, maybe this will change, but this team is disgustingly poorly coached at this stage. I think that was on another penalty they gave away, to which one of my mates responded, and the franchise construction is horrendous. To which I was thinking, yeah, but apart from that, I mean, so the coaching's not great. The way the team is built is not great. And you're right. I just think the whole vibe around the Seahawks is disingenuous right now, that there's this, and has been this idea for the last 5 years, that we're going to compete for a championship. And we are miles off. And we have always been, always for the last 5 years, miles off. And I don't know if you've seen a show on Netflix called The Good Place. It's basically a group of people pass away and they think they're in heaven because everything sort of seems okay. And they start chipping away at things. And one of the things is every ice cream shop that they have is actually a frozen yogurt place. And they start realizing that all is not what it seems. And they actually realize they're in hell, but it's just dressed up to make it feel like they're in a great place. And I kind of, in a roundabout way, feel like that's how the Seahawks feel right now. That on the surface, everything feels fine and looks fine, but you just scratch a little bit of the surface and it just falls apart, mate. Like, I would have loved to have won the game tonight, obviously, because winning is better than losing. And going forward, it's nice to watch wins, and maybe we'll get in the playoffs and that extends the season for another week and blah, blah, blah. But I did wonder, like, what are Rob and I going to talk about if the Seahawks win this game? Because I know exactly watching the game what Rob is thinking about this. And we're going to have to like brave face it, and people are going to be celebrating, as is their right. If your team wins, that is fantastic. But like, people aren't tuning in here just to sort of watch two fans talk about a win and like, rah. Like, I feel like we generally try and offer the most objective view that we possibly can on the team. And it would have been quite hard, I think, to sort of celebrate a win playing like that as much as we would have done. So yeah, like I just really feel like that's a bad one. And I tweeted out just earlier that, as with the Giants game, it's a game where it felt at the end we could have won, but we got absolutely what we deserved out of that. And if that's happening to the Rams and the Giants, that's bad. And yeah, I don't really know what to think now, because it feels like it gets worse every week. And well, that's the worst it'll be. But that was worse than Buffalo, because Buffalo were good. The Rams are terrible. They're dreadful. And so I found that a really tough watch, I have to say. And I'm pretty flat about the whole thing.
I'm starting to wonder if Mike McDonald's a bit out of his depth here. And, this is a guy who, I've said it a few times during this run, he's had 2 years as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. That's it. Before that, he was a position coach. Before that, he was the defensive coordinator in Michigan for a season. I mean, he's been a defensive coordinator for 3 total years. He is not a very experienced NFL coach. This is not somebody who was really putting the miles on the clock. And again, this is not sort of going back and saying, oh, look what I was happy with the Mike McDonald hire when it happened. And but I did write before it happened that he benefited a lot from the fact that the Baltimore Ravens were only trailing for 88 total snaps last season. And the defense benefited from that. And I'm sat here today thinking, like, I'm watching that game, Adam, and I appreciate that Seattle's offensive line is a joke. It is a total disgrace. And we'll get on to John Schneider's building of that offensive line and how bad it is. But the Rams defense had 7 sacks in that game. They had 2 rookies on the field who destroyed Seattle in Fisk and Verse, 2 players who were very high on my horizontal board. So I take no satisfaction from watching them destroy the Seahawks. But they were game wreckers today, Fisk and Verse, in their rookie seasons. Seattle had 0 sacks. Your defensive-minded head coach has come in and has not been able to generate a sack on a non-scrambling quarterback, who I thought looked jittery today, apart from that last drive. I thought Matt Stafford was on his toes all the time. He didn't look like Matt Stafford anywhere close to his best. And like I say, no sacks. I don't understand what Tariq Woolen was doing for a lot of that game. It just doesn't look like a good defense. And then in getting this really inexperienced head coach who is struggling, and he is struggling, his defense is struggling badly, we have an offensive coordinator who has never coached in the NFL before this season. And I think that shows, because you have these wild extremes, don't you? Where the offense was unwatchable until like the last minute of the first half, when all of a sudden Geno Smith's throwing it down the field and the Rams don't have any answers. And then you start the second half. They went nearly the entire second half without scoring a point and needed that last gasp drive to take it to overtime. It's just bad, Adam. And I think, as someone who has spoken, I have to admit, spoken very positively about the coaches who Seattle hired and had a lot of confidence in them going into the season, I feel really disappointed in them. And I'm not sure that just time is going to be a healer here. They might just not be good enough. Because watching that today, all of my thought was, I don't know if I can see these guys leading a proper, efficient unit because the fundamentals, as I said earlier, are just so bad. They can't do the little things right, Adam, that will allow the big things to win you games. The little things they're getting wrong every single week are abysmal, really bad.
Yeah, and they don't seem like a coaching unit at this stage, do they? It feels like, Aidan Dirty, whatever, what he does, I think it's more on the defensive line, but it feels like it's three disparate people that are coaching sections of the team themselves. It doesn't feel there's much cohesion between them. And I think that was going to be an issue with, hiring people that have never worked together. Often if you're struggling at work or you've worked with someone, they know how to get the best out of you. They can pull you out of it. They know your tendencies. They can say, well, look, a couple of years ago when we had to do this, we did this. But there's none of that. It's a rookie staff who are rookies with each other as well. And I think it's very easy to be wise after the fact, right? And it potentially, and perhaps there's examples across the NFL where this structure has worked very well, and that there have been occasions where guys that have never worked together who are all generally rookies have come together to make a great staff. I can't off the top of my head think of it. That doesn't mean that that's the case, but it just does feel like there's a lack of overall know-how and experience going on there. And you look around, and I guess Leslie Fraser was supposed to be the guy to do this, but it doesn't feel like there's a person that sort of settles it all down when the tide turns against us. And that is slightly concerning because it just doesn't feel like we're able to. I know people talk about momentum in the NFL, whether it exists or whatever, but let's assume it does. There doesn't appear to be anyone that when things start to go bad, they're able to arrest it and sort of turn it around in their direction. It kind of feels that once the slide happens, that's kind of it. And yeah, maybe you get the odd moment like we did today, but in general, once the game went in the third quarter, it was kind of gone.
Yeah, it was. One final point on the coaching before we move on, because there's so much to talk about. I think when you appoint one of the hotshot coordinators, you appoint them because you want whatever their master skill is, offense or defense. They want you at the very least expect that unit to be very, very good. So when you appoint an offensive coordinator as your head coach, you expect the offense to be brilliant. And likewise with the defense. And the defense just hasn't got close to being brilliant at any point this year. Players are playing within themselves. Braden Fisk as a mid-20s rookie is having more impact, or at least he did today, than either your top 20 pick that you spent on the defensive line this year, or the guy that you spent an absolute fortune on in Leonard Williams. He wrecked that game today, and Jared Verse did as well. In a way that Boye Mafe, I've never seen Boye Mafe and Derek Hall have a game like Jared Verse did today. So it worries me, Adam, because I think you end up in a weird place when you start questioning the coach, because there'll always be somebody willing to tell you that it's too early, that you've got to give them time. They'll always fall back on that. But sometimes you've just got a bad feeling about something. You'll have been there, not just with the Seahawks, but with Spurs. Sometimes you appoint a coach and you just work out pretty quickly, this probably ain't going to work. And I don't think I've given up yet, but that was just such an ugly performance by the Seahawks that it's pushed me closer to the line where I'm thinking, hang on a minute, have they just got this wrong? So that's that. The offensive line is an absolute shambles. And there are many teams that are a shambles, Adam, in the offensive line or don't have a very good offensive line. But I don't think there's anybody quite like the Seahawks at this point. I don't know what happened to George Fant, but they put Jarrell in there. And he just got beat like a drum. Why are we relying on, what was he, a 6th, 7th round pick? Rookie from a small school. And to call it a small school is to probably do it a disservice. It's a tiny school. Christian Haynes, who they drafted in round 3, was inactive today. He's not even good enough to make the game day roster. Anthony Bradford is bad. Connor Williams used to be good. Now he gets shoved around. He's snapping the ball as if he thinks Geno Smith's on a stepladder. Charles Cross, who everybody thinks is great, got easily beat early in the game for a sack. And Laken Tomlinson's nothing special. He had at least one penalty and a few other messes as well. How on earth, Adam, is this the offensive line? And if you are going to pick this offensive line, if you were going to go on 7-10 and say interior offensive linemen are overdrafted and overpaid, and then you end up with this offensive line, they better not look this bad. Otherwise, people are going to ask serious questions. So, can John Schneider seriously avoid any kind of heat if this, with this level of performance from the offensive line? Because it was to call it a shambles is not enough. It was an effing shambles. There's worse. I mean, I don't want to go further because I want this to be a family stream, but this is just, it's not acceptable in the slightest, Adam. And if the Seahawks rang me up and asked me and you to be the GMs, the joint GMs, and we put together an offensive line like this, it'd be embarrassing for a GM of John Schneider's reputation to put an O-line like this and to have spent years trying to figure this out. It just isn't good enough.
I mean, the offensive line issues nearly had its crowning moment in, I think, on the touchdown drive to make it 20 each. Didn't they have 7 guys in protecting? And Geno threw across the middle, and I think, is it Williams on the Rams dropped a pick, at least a pick, if not a pick 6, that would have ended the game. And Jonathan Vilma was almost laughing at how few routes the Seahawks had running because they had so many guys in protecting to try and protect Geno. I mean, it was almost like a school thing where, you've got to, we're so bad at this, we're going to have to just, deploy an amount of extra resources that you've almost never seen before. I think they had 8 guys maybe protecting or 7. It was a farce, and it has been a farce, but it's not really been that different for ages, has it? I mean, yes, it was highlighted today by being particularly bad, but it's not been a good line, well, for a decade. It's not been a passable line really for the last 3 or 4 years. And look, you have got your radar focused on McDonald, which is perfectly fair. Mine's been on Schneider for the last couple of years. I'm not a big fan personally. There'll be people that think I'm mad. Fine. There might be people that agree. It's sport. Personally, that's where my ire about the Seahawks team is currently focused. And I don't know. I just feel like we see so many bits of evidence about resources just being used poorly that how long is this guy going to get? Maybe he deserves as much time as he needs to get another turnaround. But there'll be teams at 4 and 5 that are selling this week with the trade deadline because they don't think their season's going anywhere and they want to sell. The Seahawks could be in a position to do that based on how this season's going and how many resources they probably need going forward. And I don't know, do you feel like Schneider is deserving of another massive haul to rebuild the team? I personally don't think I do.
I don't know how to answer that. Let me have a think about it while I'm sort of waffling a bit. My biggest worry when you were just saying that, Adam, is that the Seahawks will end up being buyers this week. That they will go out, that tomorrow what we'll see is they've like traded something for Brandon Scherf, let's say, or, another pass rusher or something like this. That just one more future draft
Rob,
pick.
they're one guy away. They're one guy away.
And
it's probably a defensive lineman who can't sack anyone. That's the guy they're missing. It always has been. They're one guy away.
The thing is sort of my opinion on GMs is it has been sort of a relief not to sort of have to think about replacing the GM for a while until I suppose now as we're having that conversation, because I do think it is one of the positions most that it's virtually impossible for us as sort of observers of the NFL, fans, streamers, whatever you want to, bloggers, whatever you want to describe us as, to sort of say, go and get him, because you just don't know. You have got no idea who's a good GM, who's a bad GM, who can handle this, who's going to thrive. It really is pot luck. And you end up sort of just plucking people from good staffs elsewhere. And that is so hard. So I kind of I found it a very comfortable position to be in, not having to think about this. So having to think about it now is difficult, because someone might say in a super chat, who would you appoint as the next GM? And my answer would be, I don't know. Maybe someone from the Ravens, maybe someone from the Steelers, maybe someone from the 49ers. Like it's just, you're not actually given a name there. So it bothers me. And you could end up with somebody who is even worse. So, that'd be the concern. And you could even end up with something like, I remember the last time the Seahawks had a situation like this, they almost tried to bring Mike Holmgren back as GM and or as some like football czar, and he ended up going to Cleveland instead, and they appointed Pete Carroll. I wouldn't want to end up like in a situation where they end up looking for like some football czar because this hasn't worked out, and that could go down a very difficult path. So I'm just waffling on, Adam, to avoid answering the question. I don't know what the answer is to that. I think the problem is that John needs to be honest about this roster. It has got some good players. Jackson Smith and Jigba today showed he's a very good player. In previous games, Ken Walker has shown he's a good player. DK Metcalf has shown he's a good player at times. There have been flashes from Hall and Maffei. Like, Byron Murphy's had flashes. Leonard Williams has had flashes. It's not a terrible team with no good players. They're not the Patriots. They're not the Titans, but their record at the moment is like the Patriots and the Titans. And it's because
why can't they find a single star, Rob? And that's not a question that has an answer necessarily, but why haven't they got a single player in the top 50 in the NFL and haven't for 3 or 4 years? Why?
It's a good question. That's the kind of question that ownership should be asking John Schneider. I don't know whether they are or not, because they never talk. You never really know what they think. If Jody Allen walked past me in the street, I don't think I'd recognize her. Like, I honestly, that's I said good question. And on top of the why can't you build an O-line? Why are there no like legit stars on this team? Is a great question. Maybe they do have to make a change, Adam. Maybe they do have to make a change in order to create the kind of team that they claim to want to have. Because I'm just feel like John will be, because he's done this too many times. When he tried to re-sign Jamal Adams, by all accounts, over the summer, I think to prove that actually we can still make this work. I think that's how he's inclined to think right now, is that I've built this team and it has to work. I have to make it work. But there is one thing that I will say, Adam. There's one good thing about a run like this, is it gives you nowhere to hide. Like if the Seahawks just win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, you can always tell yourself that, they're just another off season away. When you have losses like this and you stack losses like this and it looks as crap as it did today, you have to act. You don't get away with that. You don't get to just muddle along forever. Like something has to change. A coach has to change. A GM has to change. A roster needs to be worked around. And I think part of the problem is they've kind of just gone along for 3 years now since that Russell Wilson trade. Like, yeah, we'll just add good players and they haven't built a team. Jeff made that point last Monday. They've added players without building a team. They go into every draft and it's like, well, I don't really see anybody better than Geno Smith, so we'll crack on with Geno and stuff like this. And you end up with a Geno Smith experience, which again we've had today, the extreme highs and lows, because he's a streaky player. I've always said he's a streaky player. And nothing ever puts the Seahawks on the path to being great. And so I'll let you come in a second. I just want to say this, because this has really bothered me today. Like, look at Washington. That is a hopeless franchise. And they have been completely reinvigorated to the point that Adam Schefter was saying players are desperate to get to Washington before the trade deadline because they've got new ownership who are ambitious. They've got a bright young GM who's like hit the ground running. They've got an experienced staff, as much as none of us wanted Dan Quinn. And I wouldn't go back in time and swap that. But he's put a good staff together, and they've got an exciting young quarterback. And Commanders fans will be sat there thinking, the sky's the limit now for us. Like, we're on the right path. Even if don't win a Super Bowl this year or get, have a good playoff run or even get to the playoffs, it doesn't matter. Like, the team is set on the path to where you can feel confident and happy and excited about watching your team. And right now, there is nothing exciting about watching the Seahawks. I did not have any excitement going into that game today whatsoever. And watching it, I just watched it, sat there like this. through the highs and the lows. When daft things happen, I didn't react. And when the great things happen, I didn't react. The franchise is as flat as a pancake. Absolutely flat.
But it's not really been that different for a little while, has it? I mean, I feel like we've had that conversation for more years than you'd like to admit to, really. It's long are the day. I was seeing videos of Richard Sherman leveling the Carpenter, the Bills kicker, on Monday Night Football with Jimmy Graham making touchdowns, and I was at that game, and it was amazing. Like, it was buzzing, and I can't help myself. I go back to Seattle all the time, and once a year I try and get there for a game because I do love it. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we're not. It's not been kind of what the reason we fell in love with the team when we fell in love with them, at various different points, is it? It does feel like more of a chore watching this team, but it has done for a while. And I think that's why you're right, that something is going to have to happen, because there's going to be, the last week of discussions on Seahawk, Twitter and podcast was pretty emotive, and there was a lot going on, a lot of talk, but there was the slight caveat that, well, it's Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. What can you do? And there was, the Giants was a bad game, but that they'll snap out of it. Young coach. There doesn't feel like there's anywhere to hide after today. That feels like a caveatless, excuseless day that someone might end up losing their job just because that's sort of the way the NFL goes, and there has to be a sacrificial lamb that they have to just get rid of someone because that can't happen. But realistically, if someone got fired, there'd be people in the chat, if we did a live stream straight away, saying, why didn't that person get fired instead? I quite liked him. Or why is he still there? Or why not get rid of him too? I don't know. It feels like a pretty seminal moment in the future of a lot of the way in which the franchise is going to run today. I don't know if I'm being overly dramatic with that, but it really does feel like that was a big, big game. And it would have been if we won, but you could have just used that to paper over the cracks with tracing paper over the Grand Canyon. But that, because they did lose 4-5, having played 6 games at home, that's shocking.
1-5 in the last 6. 1-5. Like, think how bad you have to be to go 1-5 in the NFL. Like, that's what the Patriots started as. That's how the Titans have begun the season. That's where you are now. That's where you are. Like, you are a really bad football team who benefited from playing, well, even worse football teams at the start of the year. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking, but all the more frustrating that they played as well as they did against Atlanta. Like, almost just sort of saying, look what we're capable of. It's almost worse, like when you play as well as you do there and then play as badly in every other game. And look, there's some other topics we need to get onto. We've kind of covered the O-line's terrible, and it's a disgrace. I think we'll probably return to John Schneider before we finish, because I think I just need a few moments to think what I actually think about that, Adam, because it's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, whether he should be on the hot seat now or not. I think Mike McDonald, we've talked about reservations there. I want to talk about the quarterback because a lot of people are talking about the quarterback, so I want to get into that. But super chats first, keep them coming in. Rodney says, not sure we are headed in the right direction. Rodney, I completely agree. I think everybody agree with that today. I think there's 1 or 2 fans who may still be thinking. Now, there can't be any fans who are still thinking, oh, go again. Like, they're not even a game next week to react from this. You've got 2 weeks to stew on this. It's bye week next. Peter says, horizontal board incoming. Rob and Adam, the perfect duo for this loss. I'll tell you what, Peter, I'll put the horizontal board out this week. I'll put it out this week. There are... How many players have we got on it? 168. So it's not finished, but I'll put it out this week. SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Thank you, Peter, for the super chat. More Tesla says, try not to overreact, but do you think it's a bad idea to get what you can before the trade deadline? Thank you, Rob and Adam. I don't, just because the trades that have happened in the last week have been for peanuts. Like, there doesn't seem to be much value there. Like, if someone offers you a great deal, then yeah, sure. But I just don't think anybody's offering any great deals at the minute. So I'm not sure you get value. I think you're better off probably just waiting until the end of the season at this point and then doing your business. Can't think of anybody who would go for a big sum now in a desperate measure. Sean says, told you last week, toxic franchise at this point. Mike says, Geno must go. Fisk is better than Murphy. JS must go or no hope. Big Mike says, for all of you questioning not kicking the field goal on 4th down, if you're unable to get 1 yard on 3rd and 4th down, you don't deserve to win. Spot on. 100% spot on. Well said, Big Mike. Fish Quest says, thanks for the show, gentlemen. Misery loves company. Makes me feel a little bit better. McVay is such a good coach. It cheeses me off. Congrats, Rams. Go Hawks. Just a weekly reminder that Sean McVay won Coach of the Year in his first season in the NFL as a head coach. Appointed Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator. Vastly experienced Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator. Sometimes you just know when a guy's got it. I'm not sure whether our guy has. Baller MJ31 says, I'm glad they didn't win. We don't need any more delusion from John Schneider that we're good and competitive. Keep up the great work, Rob. Thank you, Baller. And will the Seahawks be trade deadline sellers? Kirk, I'd love to think they would if they could get some value. I think, honestly, my biggest fear right now is that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and find they've traded like their 3rd round pick away for a 34-year-old guard. Honestly, that is my fear. Because I just think they're in that desperate teams do desperate things. And I think John might feel a bit desperate, and he's got the keys to the car right now. So he might make a desperate trade to salvage the season. Peter says 168 players. We might need all of them on the horizontal board. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Thank you, Peter, for the super chats. Thank you to everybody for the super chats. Keep them coming in. One thing I will say before we get on to Geno Smith, Adam, is you said like it feels like someone needs to get fired. I agree. But here's why I don't think it'll happen. If they won't even cut D. Williams, for Christ's sake, like they ain't going to fire like a defensive coordinator or somebody like that, are they? I mean, like nobody's got cut. Hardly, no one's like Trey Brown got benched. Ooh, that sent a message. Like, come on, like you've lost 5 of the last 6. Is it really too much to ask that there might be some consequences to that? Like the head coach just do something. Call someone out. Like bench somebody. Trade somebody, John. Do something. Like Mike McDonald is always so measured, and that's a good thing for most of the time. But sometimes you've got to be a bit of an arse as a coach. You've got to get in there. You've got to rattle a few cages. Like cut somebody. Cut a couple of people. Send a message. Anyway, Geno Smith. Adam. Where on earth do you begin with Geno Smith? Because I'll tell you now, there are going to be some fans who go, you can't blame Geno Smith for anything. They'll say that this pick was because of this or this pick was because of that. There's always seems to be an excuse. And they'll mention, quite rightly, that the offensive line stinks. But he is who he is at this point. You know, he is a player who has got the physical talent to just produce the prettiest throws you will see in an NFL weekend, as we saw with those 2 touchdowns before halftime and some of the bigger throws right at the end of the game to get them in position to get the game-tying score. Like, he has got the arm to do that. But he just makes so many mistakes. We've seen how he's emotionally all over the place to go with the play that's all over the place. The mistakes are like, I do think like there are certain plays that people excuse him that I think, no, he does warrant some blame there. It is not just the picks. Like the first snap was right in his hands and it's gone through his hands. That's another bad play there. And I think on the second one, he was fannying about at the line so much, you know, trying to change the play or whatever it was. And then the ball shoots over his head as the clock hits 0. I just feel like he is what he is, Adam, which is he's thrown 3 great touchdowns today and 3 interceptions. He is up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm not excited watching him. I don't see him as anything more than a placeholder quarterback. And I actually think it doesn't really help the franchise that you have this back and forth about, is he the answer? Is he not the answer? I think the Seahawks probably need to be in a position, Adam, where they either have someone who's definitely not the answer and therefore you spend all your time looking for the answer, or you have the answer. Like, I'm not sure being in the middle is a good thing.
It's pretty amazing to me how much time is spent discussing Geno Smith's level when everyone ultimately agrees and has done for 2.5 years. Like, I feel sorry for you that you've kind of had to go into a soliloquy there.
Do you think people agree, though? I hear people
In
constantly
general,
talking about that he should be paid. Like in the Seahawks Twitter, some of the biggest high-profile people in Seahawks Twitter saying he should get like a new contract a couple of weeks ago for 50 million a year and stuff like this. And like they're especially confident. They will say you don't know what you're talking about if you disagree with them.
and look, that's fair play to them, and maybe they're seeing something that 90% of people aren't. But I generally feel like there's 5% of people on that side of things, 5% of people on the Geno is a disgrace and sucks, should never play again. What a waste of time. And then there's 90% of us that are just kind of somewhere in the middle of, yeah, he's fine. We could probably do with someone better at some point. I wouldn't pay him any more money than he's got, but he's not as bad as his worst performances, and he's not as good as his best performances. And therefore, you find your level. Like I said to you guys a couple of weeks ago that, you know, when they judge the Olympics, like diving and ice and skating or whatever, and gymnastics, and they take away the highest score and they take away the lowest score so that they can try and get rid of any of the outliers that may have found there. And that for me is what Geno Smith is. Like he's not as good as he was against Detroit, for example, but he's also not as bad as he was against the Giants or Buffalo, where he's a disaster. He's just somewhere in the middle. And I kind of feel like everyone is pretty much there on that, apart from people that are probably grandstanding or have, buried, shoved their flag into the territory so firmly that if they appear to waver from that, they're kind of disingenuous to themselves. So there's almost like, I feel like that people on either extremity of the Geno debate are actually doubling and tripling down just for the sake of the discourse, which is a really boring and quite a terrible way to act, I think, when you're trying to discuss things. But I don't know, like how we've known since that Munich game that, like, okay, this is what Geno is. And as long as we have him, this is what he'll be. And maybe if, the Goldilocks scenario, whereas if everything is just right, maybe he can be a multiple playoff game winner. But in the main, he's 9-8, 8-9, 30 touchdowns a year, maybe. The yards, he is what he is. He has been what he has been. I just don't understand. I almost feel bad for people that we have to discuss it all the time, and we're sort of forced into discussing it because the discourse arises all the time. I don't really know what else to add. He is in that level of so many other quarterbacks, and the best thing the Seahawks have done is not give him the money that cripples us going forward that so many other franchises have.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who did want them to do that, and that's kind of, I suppose, the point really is. I think what happens, and I think you and I have talked about this privately, Adam. So I'll just blurt it out now. That I think there are a lot of people within the Seahawks world that their sort of approach to whether that it is debate, discourse, analysis, whatever, however you want to term it, is to sort of pick an opinion and then fight that opinion forever. Like they can't ever, they have to pick sort of one extreme of the argument. So we've had things like running the ball doesn't matter or running backs don't matter. And you have to sort of, well, you either like fully agree with that or you are like a madman, like you don't understand football. And then it was like, well, Pete Carroll should stay or go. And there was no kind of like, that was a horrible debate for a long period of time. And now we've got the Geno Smith argument. And there always seems to be something. There's always something. And people just split themselves up into teams. And people would accuse us or me of being in the anti-Geno, hate Geno thing for merely saying when he plays well, he plays well. And when he plays badly, he plays badly. Or what I'm saying tonight, which is, I think he's very streaky. And the reactions, I've seen it in the comments tonight, Adam, is to say, people will say he's not the problem. But in sort of discussing his performance in a negative sense, that doesn't mean he is the problem. No one's suggesting that all the Seahawks need to do is insert, like, let's say, a first-round pick at quarterback at the position and everything will be saved. Like, they could even get a good first-round quarterback and there'd still be massive issues on the team and with the coaching and with the GM. Like, those problems will not go away. The point is purely to state that I just think we've seen again today just further evidence of what he is, a player who is physically able to produce great throws that are that are amongst the prettiest that you will see, but he also makes glaring mistakes, and that is what he is always going to be. And sometimes you see it in one game, like we did today, and sometimes you will see him have a horrible game, and then a good game, and then a great game, and then an even worse game. Like he's going to be like that all the way. So you just end up in this position where you think, yeah, he is just a placeholder. He is somebody right now who is better than Sam Howell and better than some other quarterback. He's better than Gardner Minshew, let's say, but because the physical tools are better. But he's not the answer. He's not someone who should be paid $50 million a year. And the problem is, Adam, is right now I'm looking at the offseason, I'm thinking they've got to repair the offensive line. They've got to find more. They've got to get better players on defense. They've got to restructure everything here. And then I think, and they've still got to find a way to get a quarterback fit, like slotted in somewhere. And if they don't do that this year, what you're doing next season at quarterback, you're just going back again for more of this. Like, at what point is the franchise? It almost feels like the Commanders are the Commanders right now because they've got the quarterback and everything, sort of all the excitement is built off the back of that. And I feel that's what the Seahawks need. They need this, like, they've got a fresh start with the coaches, but they haven't got a fresh start at GM. They haven't got a fresh start at quarterback. There's nothing really to get excited about, to sort of hang your hat on, to sort of to buy a jersey of that player and to have faith and belief in them in the way that we started to have belief in, let's say, Russell Wilson in 2012, or started to believe in the LOB at the end of 2011. Like, those things don't exist with this team at all. And it really pisses me off because I want reasons to be excited about the team, Adam. And I just end up looking at that horizontal board that I've done all the time and thinking, God, I feel like they need about 20 picks here because there's just too much. There's too much to do. And that includes the quarterback, whether some people want to accept it or not. He is a temporary measure.
Yeah, I was watching some old Russell Wilson highlights from his first couple of years, and there was like an electricity and a knowing of this is something. And I don't think fans trust their guts enough sometimes, because when you know what you're watching and it's something special, you know, and you sing it from the rooftops. And the majority of people say the same thing, and there's a general excitement. Like, I just think Geno is thoroughly boring, and there's a lot of good that comes from being boring, because it means that your floor is quite high, maybe the ceiling's low, but to do 4 or 5 years of it is when it's going to start to get frustrating. Like, I don't mind bringing Geno back this year. It was probably the right thing to do. There wasn't really the options where the draft fell for them, so they're doing it for a third year. I don't know if I can be bothered to do it for a fourth year. And part of that, I have to say, is because I do find the level of discussion around him just like, disingenuous, boring, whatever word you want to put in it as well. Like, I can't be bothered to see the people that when Geno throws a touchdown pass, pay the man. No, shut up. He's a decent enough quarterback, so he throws touchdowns on a fairly regular basis. Great. But I said after the second pick that the only thing that surprises me is that people are surprised, because that's what you get when you've got a mid-tier level with high upside, that they're going to have catastrophic moments, because that's what you have. And I don't know why everyone hasn't just agreed on that, shook hands, move on, and we can worry about the next thing we need to talk about.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. You put it very well. You put it a lot better than I did. And
I don't agree. I think I'm very tired. I feel like I'm rambling a lot today.
No. You did. That's a very good way of putting it. I do think there's a lot of fans, maybe even the majority of fans, feel that way. And look, no one's suggesting that the league is full of bad/average quarterback play. And I don't think Geno, for the most part this year, has been bad. I think, the Seahawks, have, if anything, have relied on him too much. They look at him and go, well, go on, then do something, because the defense can't, or the run game can't, or whatever. But he's not. Russell Wilson, to his credit, for a number of years before he left, could elevate a team, couldn't he? With bad Seahawks teams, or Seahawks teams that are probably not as good as this one, man for man on paper, won more games consistently because I think Russell was able to sort of make magic happen, and Geno can make magic happen with some big throws, but he's not. I don't know. Like, it's just a symptom of everything.
We thought this was the best skill position group the Seahawks had for a long time going into the season. And yes, the offensive line has not been great. But at some point, there has to be accountability of the guy that's distributing the ball. That if you all agree before the season starts that this is maybe the best group of pass catchers and running backs and tight ends that we've had, like, come on. At some point, the finger of blame, however serious or otherwise that needs to be, it does need to be pointed in the direction of the quarterback at times. And he has had a very tough time with the offensive line he's been given. That's not been easy. But I've seen some comments like, put any top 5 quarterback behind this offensive line and they'd struggle. They wouldn't. Not like this.
No.
Not like this. That's silly. Come on.
I mean, Lamar would run around. That's really difficult to contain. Mahomes is probably going to end up being the best that's ever played the game. I mean, like, come on. Like, it's a terrible offensive line, but to think that no one could have more success. Yeah, for me, it's just the broader picture that until the Seahawks have sorted out so many issues, it's going to be hard to get excited about them. One of them is, in fact, quarterback. But then the reason I started this off by saying I feel a bit sad about things is that I don't really have optimism that they've got the coach. I don't have the optimism now that we're having this conversation that they've got the GM. And if you don't have it, what do they have in place? What do they actually have in place right now? Which is a thing that, as a Seahawks fan, if you're being really honest with yourself, that makes you think that warms me as a Seahawks fan. Like, what are the pieces? If you were to sort of get a pad and write down, here's the things you need to build a Super Bowl team. How many of them have the Seahawks got? I mean, it's probably none. It's probably none right now. So that is really disheartening. A few more super chats have come in. Keep those coming in. Dirt Rabbit says, I thought I had a low bar for this season. Just wanted to see a vision, direction, and progress. Didn't think I was being greedy, but here we are. Cheers, guys. Your streams are always appreciated. Thank you, Dirt Rabbit. Adam, that's a great point, isn't it? Even as someone who expected like a decent season this year, I thought they'd have a good season. I was probably fully prepared for them not to win as many games as I thought, and would have had a lot of patience with them. I could have tolerated 9-8 or 8-9 even, if it just looked by the end of the year like they were heading in the right direction. And at this midway point, it feels like they're going backwards. They're a shambles in many ways.
Yeah, I think I've said all season that what is my view going to be like on our final stream of the season? How are we going to be discussing the fact that the Seahawks season has ended today? Because the last 2 or 3 years we've done it, it's been a really miserable show. The Niners playoff loss last year, not making the playoffs. We've sat here with Robbie, and I feel like we've really gone into a lot of stuff and dug into some quite deep emotional feelings about the team. And all I've wanted really is that when the season ends this year, it does actually feel like 2012 Atlanta that they've preached on so many times, that it feels just like that, and we're 1 year away. Like, I want it to actually feel like that, and it hasn't for a long time. And you look at the way we're playing right now, and it does strike you as difficult to think that in 8-9 weeks time we're going to be looking at this team thinking so much to build on going forward. This is really exciting, because unfortunately it's getting worse, quite dramatically worse as well, really. Since their first loss of the season, Detroit was a good loss to all intents and purposes. They gave it their all. They got beaten by a team that might win the Super Bowl. Fine. Giants, that's not great. Not quite sure what's happened there. Niners, well, at least the Niners, you can kind of caveat it. Atlanta, right, we're back on track. Buffalo happens. Okay. But this feels really bad. It doesn't feel like there's any caveats around today. And I'm really quite confused to what I've watched, because that in football, Robert, soccer football, if you watch your team play like that, you would say the manager's lost the dressing room. That's what we'd be saying if it was a football thing. He's lost the dressing room. They're not playing for him. And that's a worry when it comes to this, because we're 9 weeks into a new guy's tenure. And you're right. We've all seen that. I've seen it with Spurs a million times, where you look at a manager, think this guy's not right. I'm not sure I am there with McDonald yet. I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough about the sport to actually know that, really. But if I'm going to try and transpose a soccer element onto it, which I have watched my whole life and whatever, I would look at that and think they're not playing for the manager.
I just think he might be. My fear is, and again, I'm not saying this definitively. I'm not saying that he definitely has to go or anything like that. I just wonder, I fear a little bit that he's out of his depth. that he's just not experienced enough to bring this all together. And look, somebody's already on there's somebody on Twitter saying to me, I don't know why he's responding on Twitter, saying the defense played well today. Like it's not Mike McDonald's fault. It's like he's the head coach. Like when the team makes stupid mistakes, in all facets of the game, the buck stops with him. He's not just coaching the defense. The whole product is on him, and it's so bad. And there's little things you could pick out, like the red zone being as appalling as it is on offense. You can quite rightly point the finger at Ryan Grubb and go, that's awful. But he's not been spared any criticism either. I mean, look, we've kind of gone through everybody here. The O-line stinks. John Schneider's not done a good enough job. Mike McDonald, is he out of his depth? Ryan Grubb, Adam Durdy, everybody. The finger is not being pointed at one person here. This from Elliot says, screw analytics, just take the field goal there in overtime. Would have liked our chances better there, being up 3, says Elliot. Elliot, thanks for the super chat. I have to be honest, Adam, I couldn't give a toss. Like when that play was called, I was just sat there watching, waiting for the game so we could start the stream, thinking they'll either win or lose. I know what, like you said earlier, I know what I want to say. It'll be easier for me to say what I say if they lose. If they win, I'm probably going to say it anyway. So I was just kind of sat there thinking, we'll see what happens. And when they didn't get it, I didn't really react. I was just like, yeah. I didn't care whether they went for a field goal there or not, or I had no preference. It just, the play happened and I kind of shrugged.
Yeah, I mean, again, this could be perceived as being wise after the fact, but I sometimes feel that when you see that jumbo package come in, it kind of has to happen there and then very quickly for it to work. And it felt like the Rams taking the time out. Okay, everyone takes a deep breath, start again. Bringing that package out again to me, I got the heebie-jeebies about it. I don't know about you, but it never felt like it was going to work. Like it almost felt like, we brought it out. McVay's stopped the game, take a step back. All right, we're not going to do that again. But if they do, this is what we'll do. And I don't know. I kind of feel like in that stage, just spread people out and give give Kenan a bit of room to work. It just felt like fuzzy thinking with the yips. I thought Geno had the yips a little bit after that second pick. I mean, to be fair play to him, he rallied really well for that touchdown to JSN to put that drive together. Terrific. I'd have shat myself in the same scenario given what had happened with the 2 red zone picks. So fair play to him for rallying, but it just felt like the whole team just kind of got in their own heads a little bit and got the yips.
Couple more super chats. Drew says, playing an NFL quarterback cannot be a zero-sum game. 3 good throws don't cancel out 3 really bad ones. A QB has to have positive plays, not undone by taking steps backwards. I think that's a very good assessment there, Drew. Thank you for the super chat. Very generous of you. As with everybody who has contributed. And this one from K Sizzle was at the game. Of course, when the defense shows up, the O-line and Geno play their worst game of the year. The fans were better today, though. I suspect that's probably K Sizzle because the Rams don't have any fans. But Adam, I'm looking at the schedule. They're playing the Niners next. So that could easily be 1-6 in the last 7 after the bye. Then they play Arizona, who have a winning record. I mean, that's going to be another one of those games where it could easily go either way, I think. But if you lose another game after the bye, you do start to wonder a little bit. I don't think we've seen... I think the team was fighting today. That's the thing, is they did sort of fight. They found a way to get back into it. You wonder if there's going to be a moment where that stops. Like the thing with the Mora team is, when I think back to 2009, for some reason, there's a game at Houston that sticks in the memory where they went down to Houston in 2009, I think, and got absolutely hammered and just looked like they couldn't be arsed. Like the players were just going through the motions. Will there be a moment where that happens with this team if they keep losing? That's something I'll be keeping an eye out for. But then you've got Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota. So I've missed some games. Arizona, Jets on the road. Again, that could go either way. Cardinals, same. Packers, same. Minnesota, same. Bears, same. Rams, same. I mean, pretty much every game apart from the Niners is one of those could go either way games, Adam. And that's why I still think that despite what's happened today and despite the fact they're on this 1-5 run, I think they'll probably somehow find a way to win about 7 games. I think they'll probably win about 7 games, probably finish 7-11 this year. And I've had this conversation with Puck. Puck wants them to win every game and sort of get to the and all this. I just wonder, I've said it a few times, whether a 6-win season or less might be the best thing. Bit of short-term pain, bit of long-term game. Not for draft picks, not for draft position, not for anything like that, because it's not a great draft, but simply for the reality check of here's what needs to happen to initiate change, whatever that looks like, whether that's roster change, GM change, coaching changes, whatever it is.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I don't disagree, but they've won more games than that in the last 4 or 5 years, but they've been nowhere not closer to being a championship team, which is their self-professed aim at the start of every year. Like I've said this before, if you have a job and you are given, or you're allowed to choose your own goals for your job that year, you can go into your boss every year and say, this year, my intention is this. And for 5 years or 6 years longer in a row, you say that my stated goal is to bring in £1 million worth of business. And every year you bring in 350 grand worth of business. Like, at what point are you not allowed to say that that's your goal? Or at what point are you just dispensed with? They have told us every year that they are going to be a championship team. They're competing for championships. They are miles away and have been miles away forever. So maybe things would change if they only won 6 games one year, because the record would stare them in the face and say, right, well, we're obviously not that close. But I would really hope that the people that run my team have got more depth of knowledge and thinking than, well, we won 9 games this year, so we must be quite close. Like, if that's the levels of the discussions that are going on, then we've got bigger problems than we had to think about in the first place. Because they've not been close for ages, Rob.
No, I agree with you. Like, me and you very much in tune with that. I think what we've got to establish, though, is John Schneider is in the business of keeping John Schneider employed. So if he's going into an end of season meeting with ownership and they expect him to explain a season, if he goes in there and says, we've won 8 games, I know there were some games that were really bad, but we got to 8 wins and we understand that what the problems are. We know it's the offensive line. We've got this, and this plan to go and fix that. We believe once we've done that, we'll be in a really good place. It's a lot easier to make that case to ownership for things to just crack on. And we might want him to go in there and go, yeah, do you know what? This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, that we're doing. And then sort of go on there and everyone then go, great, right, let's fix it. The chances are that when you are in that position, you have to front up to your boss, your ownership, that you're in survival mode, whether it's justified or not, and that you will say what you think is best said to preserve your position. And therefore, your actions might well align with that once you've told ownership how close you are, because you have to follow through on what you've said. Whereas if you go in there and you've got nothing to hide behind, no like number specifically to go, look, we were that close. If it is just crap and everyone can see that the record is crap, then all of a sudden you're under a bit more pressure to be a bit more honest. And if you haven't got the answers, to find the solutions to maybe be disposed of. And that's kind of what I'm thinking here, is that, yeah, we know that if they win 8-9 games, they still should be doing all these changes, and I hope they would do. But in order to actually, for the changes to happen, they might need to have a record that goes along with that, so to sort of get to where we need to be. And I suppose to sort of bring it full circle, I will just point out, John Boy, thank you for that super chat there. I mean, is this where it is now? Do you think that the fans in Seattle this week are going to start calling for John Schneider to go? Or do you think we're a ways off that yet? Because remember, the Seahawks fans they ain't Eagles fans, they ain't Patriots fans, they ain't Jets fans. Like, there are still people telling me, I've had messages on Twitter telling me that they can't take me seriously for being this negative, like tonight. Like, there are people out there who, having watched that game, for some reason they're watching our stream if they can't handle this kind of discourse, and they're triggered by it, Adam. They don't want to hear this. So do you think people are actually going to start calling for the GM to go? Because the media they ain't going to go down that road. They're not going to go anywhere near that. No one's going to come out on the radio and say, I think the GM needs to go, because the GM listens. The GM did an interview with Bob Stelton and Dave Wyman 2 years ago. And he started off by saying having a go at Bob Stelton for saying that they'd overthought things in the draft or something like that. Something he'd said like weeks ago on the radio because he'd heard it. He's listening to all this stuff and everybody knows that he listens to it. No one's going to call him out.
Yeah, I mean, your ownership question is interesting because it got me thinking that are you putting that scenario to this ownership group or
yes,
the sports owner that you hope you have? Because I would really hope that an ideal sports owner wouldn't need to just see what the score has been to decide what they're going to do. But I think you're probably right. And maybe that lends a bigger question altogether is the ownership engaged enough to make a big difference? And are there many examples of sports teams doing well with weak, invisible ownership? Probably not. And that maybe is another discussion altogether, which I'm not going to have at 2:10 in the morning, but it may be one worth having. Just
very quickly on that, though, that's a great point. Like, we don't know anything about ownership, and that's a problem. It is a problem. Like, ownership should not just be in the background. They don't have to speak every week like Jerry Jones, because that's ridiculous. But you have to know what their plan is, what their aims are, what their expectations are, what their demands are, what they think about the team. You have to have some inkling about the people who are running the club, what they're thinking. And we don't know anything about Jodie Allen other than she parted with Pete Carroll, which was, I think, an admirable decision to make. But what are her expectations? Like, is she happy to sort of just muddle through? She gave Mike McDonald like a 6-year contract. Like, we need to know what she's thinking. I think, anyway, or at least what Bert Cold thinks, or what somebody ownership thinks if this season continues this way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're not going to change. They are what they are. And you've got silent owners, which might be fine. Maybe that's a great way for a team to run. But I don't know. It doesn't strike me. Now, you don't want Jerry Jones, obviously. But it feels that there could be a happier medium whereby there's an appearance of engagement and interest beyond, we'll have a chat in February when the season's over. Because that's kind of how it feels now, right? That the owner gets involved in February when the season's finished for a chat, and not much longer than that.
Yeah, fair enough. Is there anything else that we haven't covered? I don't think there is. I think we've kind of been across everything. And I need to go away and argue with people on Twitter, Adam, who haven't listened to half the things we've said. So maybe we'll leave it at that. Thank you to everybody for the super chats. Thank you, Adam, for your time. Like I say, it's 2:10 in the morning. This is the thing, is we come on here and we do these things and we react to this at 2:10 in the morning. I feel like we put more effort in than maybe the people sort of running this, at the top of the franchise sometimes. Because like, let's hear what you've got to think. What do you actually think about this? Like, John does a great weekly segment on the radio during the draft season when it's nice and easy. Like, I'd like to hear from him this week. I'd like, and not just an interview with the flagship who are going to tickle his tum. Like, let's have some proper questions asked and answered. But I don't know.
You should come on the stream, really, if you had any guts.
Guts. Do you know what? There's absolutely no way that John Schneider will be listening to this. And there's absolutely no way that he thinks what I need to do is go on a stream with a bloke from Rotherham and have this out. But he possibly should do like something like that and just face a few difficult questions from a journalist who is willing to do it. So what I'm basically saying is that I'm willing to do it. Like, I think sometimes you come across, I've always said this, that people who, hold positions of power within sports teams have a responsibility when things are not going so well to face the music a little bit, to be seen to answer some questions. And every time it happens, as long as you have your ducks in a row before you do that interview, it often comes off very positively. Like, you will look like you have had the nads to come forward and actually face the music a little bit. And fans respect that. What fans don't respect is a wall of silence. What fans don't respect is only speaking to the people who are going to give you an easy time. And like last week, there was a question about how good was it for Josh Jobe to get an interception after that, mess of a performance against the Bills. It's like that in an 8-minute press conference. We don't need to hear about how good Josh Jacobs' interception was. And I'm going to go and listen to the press conference. And I really don't want to hear any more like, hey, on a plus side, wasn't it great that Jackson Smith and Jigba had a great day? Like that's not. There's a time and a place in this, isn't it? So, I don't know. I don't know, Adam. I'm just fed up. I want to be excited about the Seahawks again, and they're not exciting, are they? At all.
They are not, and they're not getting more exciting, unfortunately.
And it's a long. How many games are left? It's like 8 more games. Oh my God. 8 more of these.
So I got a question. If you found an amount of money that made a difference to your life and you could just keep it or you could bet it on a Seahawk game, how many teams in the NFL right now would you put that money on the Seahawks beating?
Okay. Right, let's have a look. So
let's assume full health for everyone. So you're going to get the Drake May Patriots, for example, as opposed to Jacoby Brissett. And you're going to get Tua for the Dolphins, for example.
I would Titans.
You can't even say the Giants.
No, definitely not saying them. I think they would beat the Panthers. I don't think I'd bet on. I've seen them play the Patriots and it was close, and Drake May is better than Brissett, so I wouldn't bet it on that.
Saints?
No. I didn't the Saints hammer the Seahawks last season?
Yeah,
was it the season before?
Taysom Hill went bananas, didn't he?
I'd say Panthers and Titans are probably it. That's probably
that's not great, is it?
No. I think I think they're a bad team with some good players, but not a team. The good players are not part of a good team. They're like individuals. Right.
I do think what Jeff said, and I'm looking forward to your show with him tomorrow, but his thing about that and his thing about the Harbaugh charges that this is what they're going to do, and they're going to do it regardless, is one of the most interesting and like appreciative things that I've heard in the whole of the Seahawks like discussion all season. Because I really feel like if you use that as a basis, a foundation of how to build a team, that's like really good insight. And like not taking Malik Neighbors and sticking with what you're going to do. And you know where the charge are going to be next year. And I just think it's a really interesting thing that hasn't been like Jeff deserves like a really like enormous platform to say that thought, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, do you know what was disappointing about it actually is that that sort of listening to Jeff say that and had the conversations that I'm not just saying it because we're on this channel and I think the conversations that we've had tonight, that Jeff and I had on Monday, that I sort of when I was waffling to myself last weekend had. I think we get into things, and then I kind of expect to hear them elsewhere, Adam, like on the radio shows and stuff, and they never get into them. Like they never ever talk about anything that seems that important within the actual media. Maybe that's just indicative of where we are, like within sort of media these days. That you've kind of got like the YouTube channels and stuff like that who will get into it, and then you've kind of got the actual, what you would consider the more traditional forms of media, who have to skirt the issues. They've got shorter segments. They can't sort of dedicate as much time to a topic. But I feel like the only time I ever hear any sort of like serious, weighty analysis is when Hugh Millen's given like 15 minutes non-stop to talk at the moment. Like it's just, that feels as if that's about it. Like you don't actually hear it on the, and I wish you would, because I think there's a lot of people out there like I think Brock Heward's tweets after a game are so revealing. Like he's put out today, so many glaring issues with the Seahawks in 2024. The defensive front played better, but Woolen was a liability. JSN explodes, but Geno's picks and the O-line woes wash it away. 12 penalties, 7 sacks allowed. Situational shortcomings, losers of 5 and 6 into a bye. Like he's like getting into that, but I don't feel as if that crosses over sometimes into what I want to hear that in a decent weighty segment for half an hour or an hour, not just 10, 8 minutes. So I don't know. Maybe, Adam, it's time that we stop talking because it's 2:20, and I'm just
or we just keep going until the media listen to us, Rob, and they take what we're saying and they run with it.
But that's it. Listen, I'm sat here complaining about the media not talking about these things, like as if it matters. Like it doesn't even matter. But at a time like this, you end up just wanting to complain about
listening to
everything.
It, I like just listening to it, like an interesting topics, and Jeff's one and your guys' shows, and all the shows, like all the pods and shows, like it's just interesting to listen to, because I do feel like wherever the Seahawks are right now, it is an inflection point in the franchise, for good or for better or for worse. And when you're in the eye of the storm like that, it is interesting just to be a part of it and talk about it and listen to it, even if you're not winning.
Yeah, it's just so hard. Like when you look at the roster, like you look at the roster and its breakdown, like you go on Wikipedia and you look at it and you just think, I wonder where to start. Like there's so much work that needs doing. And then you look at the cap situations, you think, my word, like they've got no money. Like they're going to have to find ways to create money with this. And in creating the money, they're going to then take on more dead money, which is a Seahawks speciality. And then like you haven't got 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks like they had for a couple of years after they traded Russ. So like you don't have that ability to have like a game-changing draft. And whereas like other teams have kind of parlayed trades like the Lions into game-changing roster revamps, we haven't. And
we haven't really changed anything for 5 years.
They're just muddling along. We just become one of those middle of the road teams, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough to be up until 2:20 in the morning talking about middling team. Like something has to change. They're 1-5 in the last 6. 1-5. Anyway, I'm going to go and write a big article now, Adam. I'm going to stick it on the blog, and I would if people would be grateful. I'd be grateful if you check it out, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you to everybody who's watched this, because we've had massive numbers, and really appreciate the super chats as always. Subscribe to the channel, because Jeff and I will be getting together tomorrow, and we'll continue the debate then. You won't miss any of the videos if you subscribe. Like the video, that helps. Leave a comment in the comment section. That really helps. Please just do those 2 things. If you want to do me a favor, then a like and a comment in the comment section is great. Let's get those subscriptions up. It is much appreciated when you do those kind of things. Enjoy what is left of your weekend. Adam, thank you as always for your time. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.